Good luck. Puts on the step, goes right through, puts on the step again. Oh, go Freddie! That was magnificent stuff. Well, they shall not believe them. Marshall skips away, Marshall's still going. Mullins opens up again. Oh, look at him go. He beats O'Davis on the outside.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of The Voluntary Tackle, the only NRL podcast launching its own arm wrestling championship starring Ben Ross's more functional and less shattered left radius. I'm your host, Eamon Brown, and today on the show we'll be chatting about whether or not Latrell Mitchell getting booed is warranted, whether Fergo should be welcomed back into the NRL after a short-lived career as a Japanese criminal, provide our predictions for the round ahead, and finish with a discussion about player salaries, which we didn't get to last week. Sorry about that, we ran out of time after Mario had to take a whiz and it took 23 minutes. He wheezed with the same ferocity as black caviar, who knew? But before we get started, please, if you have time, rate and or review the show wherever you're listening to the podcast to ensure the lads do not have to beg for downloads down at the local bus shelter again. The last time we did that, Xander had an old lady piss in his face. Traumatic for those who witnessed it, but not for Xander. Actually paid her cash for that to happen. So please do rate the show and make us happy, and follow us on Twitter at the handle @VoluntaryTackle to keep up to date with all of our absurd views on the wonderful game of rugby league. But first, I'm joined in the Sports Best Friends studios by two men who, if they were ever asked to chase down Todd Byrne during an NRL match, would do so, like the rest of the able-bodied population, with absolute aplomb. The first is rugby union's answer to rugby union, Xander Risotto. Hello to you, sir.
G'day, mate. How you doing?
It's very good to have you here, sir. And the second is the evil Prince of Brookvale, Media Watch Mario. Thanks for joining us, mate.
Absolute pleasure.
Now, Mario, let's start with you and your beloved Manly. I want to get it straight from the horse's mouth. What went wrong against the Chooks, and how expensive is the therapy you're now receiving?
2008, we lost the opening two games of the season. I've said it so many times already this year. I'm going to say it to death, so I'm not concerned at all. In terms of what went wrong, well, you know, our hooker sucks, our centers suck, our forwards sucked, apart from Hamola. He was the only one who was good the entire game, I thought.
Is it time to end the Lachlan Croker experiment, you think?
The best possible time to end the Lachlan Croker experiment was the absolute moment before they signed him.
I love that. I guess the only alarm bell from last year is that I guess you started off the season without Tommy, and then when he came back, it really turned everything around. Obviously, Tommy's here for the beginning of the season. Does that concern you at all?
Not really, because as has been said, Tommy's just one guy. He didn't do a lot in the game, but as I said, no one did anything. The forwards did nothing. Poor old Saab couldn't run his way through a wet paper bag if it lines up against him. There's just no go forward for the team. And, you know, no fullback's going to be particularly effective, even perhaps the best fullback. Although, you know, he may not look the best fullback at the moment, but I think we could all agree he was last year. And yeah, he's got nothing to work with at the moment. And I'll worry if we can't get it done against the Bulldogs on the weekend.
Yeah, no, he's a freak. Don't you worry about that. There's nothing wrong with Tommy Turbo. He will be back. Xander, I want to start with you on the same game. A bit of a shock, I think, to most Roosters fans. Hutch, he was moved into the hooker role by Robbo. I have to say, to me, that was a big surprise. In fact, it was the biggest surprise since Mary Antoinette's head bounced upon its decapitation, only to be alley-ooped into a basket by her executioner. How did you see that one?
Well, it wasn't just Hutch, right? I mean, he effectively switched our attacking, our point of attack on both sides. You know, he put Billy Smith to the wing, and he brought Momrovsky into centre. In general, looked a lot more cohesive. And Hutch was good. He kicked 40-20 even, which was quite unexpected.
I think he was buzzing, wasn't he? He was buzzing on the euphoria of being in the run-on side. And, yeah, I think that's where that 40-20 came from, just that sheer adrenaline/cum that he had sort of flowing throughout his body.
But it wasn't just that. I mean, it was also
but
last
you acknowledge
week...
there was cum there. That's good.
Yes. There's 40-20 is generally producer, I find, at least for me.
It does for me when I watch, I tell you.
But I was not expecting them to play that well. I mean, I was on the record last week thinking, geez, you know, this has shades of a few years ago when we took a little bit of time for the side to really find their groove and build those combinations. I thought, this is the first time that Walker and Curio played together really as a starting halves pairing after what was a pretty challenging injury-ridden year in 2021.
I have to say, Mario, the probable wooden spooners looked red hot against the Tigers, didn't they?
Well, yeah, obviously the probable wooden spooners is your term, not mine. But yeah, certainly can't argue that was not the performance I think anyone expected after the Tigers had actually been useful the week before.
I got to say, I think this is like the worst standard of football I've seen a team play in a long time. That was about 1,000 penalties, 1,000 drop balls. No one looked elusive. They almost looked dirty on themselves, the Tigers. They were just giving away stupid penalties. I think Tyrone Peachey got himself sin bin, so he didn't have to play anymore.
Yeah, you got to wonder, don't you? If they're playing the Warriors this week, who've now dropped, although they say not, Ash Taylor for Nicarima. They're still missing Sean Johnson. I'm planning on tipping the Warriors for this one, but honestly,
of course you will. You're not insane.
But if the Tigers can't get this done, can't at least have a vastly improved performance, you've got to start to have question marks over Luke Brooks and Madge Maguire. I know they don't want to change coaches, but questions are going to be asked by their fans who are certainly very reactionary, I think you could say.
Look, because TVT is at the cutting edge of the news cycle, I can just tell you there is some late breaking news out of the Tigers camp. They've actually been relegated to A grade in the under-30s comp. They'll now be playing Wiley Park from Heffron, so good luck to them. I hope they finally get a win. Now, Xander, any changes in the way you feel about either the Dragons or the Dogs based on what we've seen so far? We're only 2 rounds in, but I have to say both teams are, at the very least, quite competitive.
Yeah, no, I was quite impressed with both of them over the weekend. I'm not going to tip either of them this weekend, though. I was impressed with them, but I think the Sharks will have too much for the Dragons, and the Dogs won't be able to beat Manly. I just can't see it. But they're definitely on the improve. The game against the Broncos was actually really impressive. I thought the Dogs had the better of the first half. Reynolds really earned his money in helping them pull that one out of the bag, I thought, in the second half.
I've got to say, I think that the Dogs actually outplayed them. There was an individual effort from Farnworth, a great one-on-one steal, and had the Bulldogs not had Alkenbauer on the wing, who can't defend for love nor money, let's be honest, he has zero idea. He's just a turnstile blowing in the wind. So that is an issue. For me, that's a no-brainer. You just get anyone in. I just pull them in from the crowd. I don't care. What I found really interesting, I don't know if you noticed this, Mario, is Trent Barrett. I know you're not his biggest fan, but he pulled out a bit of a strategic furphy on the weekend. He had Josh Jackson playing predominantly at first receiver, which was interesting. He's not a noted ball player, but it actually seemed to work quite well, I thought, and I'm assuming this is to try to make up for their halfback deficit.
I mean, you'd have to assume that's it. I just thought that Trent Barrett was trying to channel, the old Des Hasler days back when he had Tony Williams and was it Sam Cassiano as his halves? And I have this horrible feeling that was against Manly and the Bulldogs even won, but I might be wrong on that.
That's a halves pairing that weighs about 330 kilos. That's amazing.
You think, you want Sam Walker or Luke Keary or, Daly Cherry Evans running at you. No one's quaking in their boots. Suddenly it's these two monstrosities.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the Roosters can't talk. We've got the exact opposite. You'd almost swear that they've been raised in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, but they're doing a good job, and, in Robbo, I trust. Now, gents, it's time for our new awards of the week segment. It's sponsored. We actually got a sponsor on board. It's quite a revelation. It's actually been sponsored by something that's no longer on the market, though. It's the short-lived fragrance Lynx Iceland, the only deo guaranteed to make seals and fishes more sexually attracted to you while snowshoeing. The first one is the Dylan Alcott Award, guys.
Thank you. I think standing ovations are one of the most ironic things in the world, by the way. But I'll take them. All right.
It's named in honour of Australia's favourite hero. Everyone loves Dylan, so we thought if we're going to pick a hero of the round, it may as well be named after that champ, Dylan. Look, I'm going to start with mine. For me, 1,000 times yes. My hero was the efforts of the Sharks' Toby Rudolph for his euphoric cavorting with the crowd after the Sharks' last-minute win on the weekend. He jumped the fence after the dramatic win against the Eels and embraced and hugged random people for a solid 15 minutes. I mean, sure, he was COVID positive and half of them are now in hospital. To me, it was heartwarming to see a player as joyous with the crowd as he was and wanting to share it. Mario, who was your Dylan Alcott winner?
I hate the Storm, in case anyone wasn't aware, but it was Ryan Pappenhausen. I loved his field goal a lot. That they ran out on him, looked a little bit offside, I thought, the South's defenders, and he just simply dodged around, sprinted forward, which is not how you're supposed to take a field goal attempt, and he just slotted it cool as a cucumber. I thought it looked almost as good as his hair.
I tend to agree with Mario there, Xander. I quite enjoyed the end of that match because it's much better to see Souths lose in a tight one because it's more agonising. So I certainly enjoyed it a lot more. If you just flog them and soul is beaten from the outset, it's not as fun. So to see the Pap sink their ship so late in the game, it was very gratifying for me. But who was your Dylan Alcott winner?
I'm tempted to say Hectic Cheese just for the imitation of Latrell that he did at the end of the game, to be honest. Just for pure comedic value, doing the ear to the crowd symbol, but with a very goofy face. On Fox Sports, they've beaten it up a fair bit and said that Souths are furious, but from what I can tell, Trell thought it was quite funny as well, and they've had a bit of a back and forth, but still just very funny.
We're going to move on to who earned the dubious honour of winning the David Siege Trophy.
When they told me it's a 12-month injury, I thought, that could be it. I thought I might be packing up and heading back to Wynnum.
Earning that person an inscription on the TVT David Siege Memorial Urinal and a 12-month ban from rugby league. I'm going to start with you, Mario. Who's got your David Siege Trophy for the week?
I mean, I feel bad because I've been a bit of a fan of this guy, but Cody Walker, he's got the yips or something. He looks like crap.
Do you think it's that intercept in the grand final? That was seen to be a turning point. I know it's only really 2 full games since, but I think having that intercept in round 1 to Albert Kelly probably didn't help his confidence.
I think it really didn't. It just feels like, when you go through a bad patch in some sports, it's really hard to get out of. I don't feel like rugby league is really that sport normally. You don't see the evidence of people just really being in their own heads and just struggling for weeks and weeks when they're normally good. Whereas at the moment, he's got a good moment in him here and there, but he's just, he doesn't look confident. And was it last week or the week we just had, or was it week 1 or week 2, where Cody Walker was actually walking and everyone just sort of stood and watched him just go, "What are you doing, mate?" He had the ball and he just sort of took 3 or 4 really slow steps. And he's like, "I don't know what to do," and just gave it to someone else.
Yeah, you've obviously probably played a lot of touch football in your time, but that's a common sort of thing that touch footy players do. And I feel like it's just sheer exasperation. He was out of options. And you're right. I think he was walking around just assessing, going, well, our structures in this set aren't working. Maybe I'll try to play something off the top of my head. Someone will come out of the line. But yeah, it kind of looks ordinary from the outside looking in, doesn't it? Look, you think he might have the yips. Xander, how much could Cody Walker's lack of form at the moment be to do with the general and number 7 no longer being with him?
Well, I mean, I'm on the record of saying this numerous times, but I just don't think that Cody Walker without Adam Reynolds is that effective. I mean, every game last year where they played and Reynolds went off or he was missing, Walker just suddenly looked impotent. I don't know what it is. For whatever reason, I think he needs Reynolds there to kind of be the game manager and steady the ship for him and allow him to play his instinctive style. And without him, he struggles to produce that magic.
Cody Walker has never struck me as the kind of guy that is managing matches. He is a strike player who does play, not necessarily just off the top of his head, but he has a particular set of skills that he can apply if someone provides him the opportunities. And at the moment, I think he's sort of stuck between still trying to be that guy from last year that was so dangerous, but also managing the team because he's got an inexperienced halfback next to him. But potentially it's that lack of certainty in his own mind, being really clear with what his role is, that could be affecting his game.
You see this a lot. Like I've seen it, for 20 years in halves watching the game, where you have a talented but somewhat instinctive, 6 or 7, depending on what the maturity of their partner is, and then a kind of steady, mature general kind of half that allows them to play their natural game. And when when the steady player goes, the kind of more natural one often just doesn't manage to play with the same creativity afterwards.
Yeah. Do you think
I
that's
remember,
fair that it's a bit of a template with the Roosters? Would you say that aptly describes Luke Keary and Cooper Cronk?
I mean, in a nutshell, Cronk really allowed Keary to come into his own and play his natural game more than anything. I mean, I can even remember thinking of it back when Brad Fittler partnered with Brett Finch. Like Finch looked pretty bloody good when Fittler was there, because Fittler just gave him a lot of freedom by just controlling the game completely. And he could pop up and do whatever he wanted. And then when Fittler was gone, Finch looked like a reserve grade player.
Yeah, geez, I wish he could control his WhatsApp account. That would have been nice. Xander, we still haven't got your David Siege Award.
The Tigers' entire team. I couldn't single it. I was trying to think who was the worst performed, but oh, Jesus, that was an atrocious performance. The writing has got to be on the wall. I think for several years I keep expecting somehow, as much as I bag matched, I keep expecting something to go right for them, and it's just atrocious. I'm using the logic that a broken clock is right twice a day, right?
Yeah.
But it just
Doesn't
haven't gotten to that.
Look, if the players were supposed to be playing for Madge's career, the whole squad missed the memo, so they're
playing for it, but just not in the way that he wants.
Yeah.
They're playing to end it.
Well, look, my David Siege winner, lads, for what it's worth, was Alex Johnson, someone who actually Mario had to go out last week. It was a prophecy, because who, despite scoring a try, bombed about 8. If he caught at least one in the 2 passes, the Bunnies probably would have won by 12 against the Storm. We're going to move on to which team was the best performed. They will earn themselves a jewel-encrusted lead-line TVT coffee mug with extra asbestos tea bags. Whose was yours, Mr. Risotto? We'll start with you.
So I'm going to be incredibly biased here and say the Roosters, just because after last week, I honestly was expecting us to be pretty clunky again, and I thought Manly had everything to play for, and just on paper look like they look like a top 4 team. And the Roosters just tore them to shreds in the first half. Manly really brought the game to us in the second, when with the weather coming down, but the Roosters held their nerve. Some really cracking defence, a couple really big clutch plays, as we mentioned, the 40-20 late in the second half to help us regain momentum and, I guess, limit those attacking opportunities from Manly. I was tempted to go with the Knights, but the Tigers were just so awful. It's hard to give them too much credit.
Yeah, look, my only worry in that game was that, it did look as though our forwards tired and Manly's forwards started to get over the top of us, I thought, in the last sort of 20. But we'll see how that goes in round 3. I'll go next. Look, for me, it was the Sharks. They scored twice as many tries as their much more fancied opponents, but held their nerve to steal it in the final minute. Look, guys, for me, it was a wonderfully entertaining match. It showed me that the Sharks, I guess, haven't only increased their talent stocks this year, but also their mental resolve as well. Big shout out to Fitzy. Could have been pretty easy there to just put their heads down after that Reid Marnie try late in the second half, but they didn't. They came away with the cookies, so they were my best performed team. I'm going to finish with you though, Mario. Whose was yours?
I might not be taking this quite the way it's supposed to be, but I'm going to go the Cowboys purely on
that is right.
How much of an improvement they put on from the week before. In round 1, they looked like they couldn't have beaten 1999 Wests or 1998 or whatever it was when they were still around.
I think both of them.
And in fact, they look like they would have struggled to beat 2001 West when I know they didn't exist anymore. That's how bad they were in round 1. And for them to do what they did in round 2 against what we had all thought, well, maybe the Raiders are a good team after all. Oh, no, it turns out they're not.
Well, I was going to ask you that, Mario. How much of that win for the Cowboys, and it was a big win, was down to their performance, and how much was down to Canberra being stinky? Because I've got to say, they played shocking.
Oh, look, they really did. And obviously losing their hooker hasn't helped them. And they're just going to continue to suck and even more, which is a great shame, I'm sure. Look, it's just hard to say. You can only beat the team that's in front of you, and the Cowboys actually did it pretty well. Much better than I expected from a team that I thought would struggle to win more than 2 games all year.
Yeah, I have to say, I think they need Paul Bowman back in the centres, frankly. Or they need his No, they don't actually. He's shit.
They have 17 poor carriages instead.
God rest his rugby league career. All right, lads, we're going to move on to our first segment of the show, and it's about Souths, who were actually left shocked, apparently, by the booing of Latrell Mitchell by the Melbourne Storm crowd during their game against them last week. South CEO Blake Solly even went so far as to say he hoped this did not become a regular thing at other games and in turn into an Adam Goodes situation. The first question we're asking in the show is this, racist assumptions by Solly aside for the moment, is booing players like Latrell a bad thing? It actually strikes me that the game needs heroes and villains. I think that's something I've always said, and Mitchell, I guess by virtue of the aggressive way he plays and his huge talent, obviously, might just be the NRL villain the game needs. That's just my thoughts. But we'll start with you, Mario. Do we need booing in the game?
Booing is fine. I think as long as it's not systemic in a way that like the Adam Goodes booing was, which was just completely unjustified, just a bunch of racists getting their backs up. I don't think it's at that stage with Latrell, and I hope it doesn't get there. There's certainly going to be a few racists in there who are just happy to boo him. Oh, I just don't like him because he's a flog, even though in reality it's probably just because they're racist. But the guy has done enough in his career, successful and the bad, to warrant having people, have a strong opinion about him, and the teams he's played for might warrant some people not liking him simply for that reason. I feel like majority of the boos he's getting at the moment are probably ones he's earned by a combination of being good and of being a dickhead.
It's not the same as Adam Goodes, who was basically a gentleman on and off the field. And whenever I heard somebody try and explain why they booed him, it was because he was, quote unquote, staging for kicks, which is, I think, AFL parlance for diving, which seems a bit of a stupid reason to be, getting upset at a player in AFL, given that they basically tackle like girls anyway.
Spoken like someone who doesn't watch enough NRLW. Sorry, continue.
That very fair point.
Nice one.
But I actually have been watching a lot of NRLW. I think the standard's been fantastic this year, I should say. I think that in Trell's case, you're absolutely right, Mario. He's done an awful lot, both at the Roosters and even probably more so at Souths, to earn the ire of players. I mean, he obviously smashed the face of Joey Manu at the back end of last year. He does tend to give it to crowds when he plays. Kind of seems to really get up them when he scores, and he shows quite a bit of arrogance, which I think, as you say, Eamon, it's good to have characters in the game who fire up and really get emotionally involved. And in his case, I think the booing is a byproduct of his larger-than-life character.
If you're getting booed, it means you're a focal point of the game's consciousness, in a way, I guess. The shit players don't tend to get booed. It's the players that can influence a game that can get booed. So I'm just wondering if, there's been a bit of media scrutiny for the act of booing itself, but I'm actually for booing so long as it's done in the spirit of, heroes and villains and not done maliciously, aka in Adam Goodes' case.
I want to point out, I did say that Latrell was a dickhead. I think it's more that he has done a bunch of dickhead things. I think our game is far richer for having him than it would be without him. Absolutely. No question about it. But I hope I'm right. I get the impression that he sort of thrives on that character that he is playing, and in terms of copying a bit of shit from rival fans. He's playing for his team. He doesn't give a shit if rival fans boo him because he's there to try and win games for South. He just, unfortunately, he hasn't done it at the right time of year, or fortunately, depending on your point of view.
It reminds me a little of, I don't know if you probably know this story, Eamon, but they talk about sledging in cricket, and Viv Richards famously used to just get better the more you sledged him. So opposing teams would always tell their players to do as little as possible to give him more ammunition to thrash him around the park.
Yeah, that's
right.
I
think there's a touch of that in Trell.
I'm big on rugby league theatre, and to me, the crowd getting stuck into him, and then Latrell having that moment where he knocks over a 40-metre field goal in the last couple of seconds to level a game and running to the crowd. I mean, that is a really memorable moment, and that is a brilliant advertisement for the game, surely. For me, I don't care what Solly's saying. I think it's really great for the game. And so long as no one's getting personally hurt, i.e., the boos aren't coming for some ridiculous reason like racism. And for the record, I don't think that's the case with Latrell at all. I think that the boos are coming because A, he's a wonderful player and he's really good, and B, he often does it sometimes by blurring the lines between legal play and illegal play and being super aggressive. And we've all seen that in the last couple of years. He does go over the line because he gets a bit of white line fever. But geez, if we didn't have some of those players in the game, it'd be a bit of a snooze fest.
Three white guys all agree that this Aboriginal guy's not being booed based on race.
We put out a poll as well, gentlemen, to our listeners, and we asked, should booing be outlawed at NRL matches? We only put it out an hour ago. Encouragingly, we got 200 votes, so that's a fairly good sample. 92% say no, so they're agreeing with us on that count. We've got a few comments underneath this. One is from David Hunter, who said, "Boo earns." Thank you for that Simpsons reference, David. Sandy Hunter said, "I think booing is acceptable. When it gets disrespectful, it becomes an issue." I think that's hard to disagree with. Although Remy in response said, "There's a thing called respectable booing?" ?
Yeah, booing Scott Morrison. We're all allowed to do that.
Totally. I think that's mandatory under the Constitution.
Can I actually, whilst we briefly have Scott Morrison, did anyone see him on the weekend when Nico Hines was lining up his kick and Scott Morrison was doing the woo-woo hands?
I did.
And
see
I
that.
was wondering if anybody has told him that you're meant to do that when the opposition kicks. If you have, the people who are doing it when your team is kicking, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah,
you're not supposed to curse your team.
I thought that maybe Rugby League had adopted that ironically. I actually have no idea.
I think maybe, isn't it? I think the Sharks have been doing that with their kickers as a positive thing for a little while. I could be wrong, but I feel like I remember seeing that a few times before. Yeah,
I haven't seen it before. I just looked at him like, that's really silly, because famously that is meant to be that's putting the mock on the opposition, is when you wiggle your hands like that.
Yeah, and as Mario said, they've had such shocking goal kicking over the last two seasons, the Sharks. They could be doing it as some kind of ironic gesture for their inability to actually kick a goal.
Like shaking your hands because it can't get worse.
Trying to do the reverse Kavorka.
Maybe they were just listening to the new Chats cover of the Wiggles and they were just pointing their fingers and doing the twist.
Look, I'd love to know what that is. Who's Chats?
I'll share a link in the message too.
Thanks, mate. I think the listeners would find this all enthralling, to be honest. But look, the last comment we have here from 910321 Premiers said it would be unfair on West fans because they couldn't boo the opposition and their own team. It would be like watching a silent movie. At the end of the day, and when Latrell looks back on his whole career, I think he'll actually look back on the booing with fondness, and he'll realise that some players don't get booed or cheered at all. Some simply get forgotten and are forced to start up an unsuccessful Mexican fast food franchise and become the subject of a legal wrangle with a property developer. Yes, my thoughts are with you, Shane Russbrat. Spare me your mediocre burritos. They are as bland as your dummy half service. More after this. Well, lads, the man who's always taken his second chances with both hands and rarely transgressed wants back into the NRL. Yes, I'm referring to the vodka cruiser swilling, coke snorting, sushi smashing winger Blake Ferguson. He's out of Japanese prison, feeling refreshed, and so today on the show we're asking, should an NRL club throw this perennial legal booby a lifeline? We'll start with you, Mario. Should Fergo get a 19th chance?
Parramatta missed out on Jermaine Osako today, so I honestly see no reason why they wouldn't just get him on match payments, on a minimum wage contract. He might only play 3 or 4 games for them, but it might be the 3 or 4 games they need if he's, fit and healthy, and there's really no harm done in there as far as they're concerned. There's worse people than Fergie out there. He got done doing drugs in Japan. I know what he did in the past, but that was a long time ago, and I'm not a big redemption person, but he hasn't done any, George Burgess style behaviour that we know of in many years. Allegedly, definitely allegedly. I just think, what's the harm? He's better than Brad Parker.
What would you be willing to pay per match for Ferguson if he was coming to your club, Mario?
Just whatever minimum wage is, honestly. I think is it about 125 grand a year? You're not getting him for a full year, so if you just offered him like a, what's that, 100 grand over the next 20 rounds? 5 grand a game. There you go.
I thought you were talking actual minimum wage, like $17.99 an hour, McDonald's style.
That's what I
No,
thought
I
too.
definitely meant NRL minimum wage.
Could probably fit that under the cap, Xander. What about you? If hypothetically Fergo was to come back to the Roosters, he has played there before. If we were able to get him at a song, would you welcome him back with both arms?
I mean, yeah. Look, if you were getting him on the cheap, you'd have to think he'd learnt his lesson. I mean, he'll be hurting. I mean, you know, he's 31 and he was on a $1.5 million contract to play, you know, rugby in Japan, which is a pretty easy gig, really, compared to the NRL. And, you know, he brought Coke and got into a punch up at a restaurant in Tokyo basically within a month of arriving. It's mind-numbingly stupid, and you'd hope that he'd be feeling pretty fucking stupid for doing it, because that's a huge opportunity. Like I can't quite wrap my head. It's still money.
I'd call it a reprieve.
Right? Like, yeah, I think you know, basically he was going to go on a short holiday in Japan to get paid a lot of money, because the physical toll on his body was going to be nothing like what it was going to be in the NRL. So yeah, my only misgivings would be, you know, I'm wondering if he'd be looking for other opportunities, because, you know, this was his retirement gig. You know, how motivated is he going to be to come to the NRL for minimum wage when he's in the twilight years of his career and he's just blown a massive chance for his family? Will they even accept it? So I'd question whether or not he even be open for it if he'd be looking for something else, hoping that maybe French rugby or some other cashed up group would be willing to give him a shot.
Well, apparently the reports are that he has asked his manager to shop him around in the NRL. He's pretty keen on an NRL comeback. And for someone that you describe as mind-numbingly stupid, I don't know if that's exactly the selling point they're going to go with. I want to ask you, Xander, though, just to push you on that point. You know, apart from the fact that he's, you know, in the twilight of his career and he's had a few problematic knees, etc., is Fergo worthy of a second chance, or, well, it's probably a fifth chance in the NRL now?
I think he is. I think he is. Like, I mean, Mario is quite right. Like, his offences are, you know, he's not, you know, beaten up a woman or done something that's morally reprehensible. He's just shown incredibly poor judgment for his own future. You know, which is its own kind of failing, but it's not the sort of failing that you want to bar somebody for life for.
Well, he did sexually assault a woman, though.
But that was a long time ago, was what I said. I mean,
I was going to say not in Japan. He didn't. I wasn't aware of the sexual assault case. When was that?
That was before he came to us. He got a 2-year ban from the game over it.
Ah, right. Jeez, I don't even remember it.
Well, that's probably a good segue, right? Let's walk through his history and then we'll make a judgment together, because I'm kind of inclined to agree with Murray here. I mean, I'm a redemptionist to a degree, but let's go through his rap sheet. So he walked out on the Sharks. He was famously saying that he left the club because he thought they were shit. And he went to the Raiders. Then he was sacked by the Raiders after he failed to show up to a board meeting to explain his erratic behaviour, which included spitting on people at a music event and doing a few other weird things. Then he committed the really bad crime and was suspended for the game for 2 years. Came back to the NRL, played with the Roosters, won a premiership. That was a nice little period for him. Left for more money at Para, who released him after his ability to score tries on a wing for a competitive side was close to zero. Then he went to Japanese rugby, like you say, Xander, and was arrested and imprisoned without playing a game, I don't think. So surely he deserves a second chance.
So I think it's fair to say in his early 20s, he fucked up a lot. He showed a lot of maturity in the last few years. I thought, you know, he stint at the Roosters whilst he was at Parramatta as well. I mean, even though, you know, he was a bit up and down form-wise, he was definitely a different player. You know, doing a bit of drugs whilst you know, overseas, really, really dumb. Like I said, I still can't fathom it. You know, when you put it on a risk management matrix, what you stand to lose versus what you stand to gain, it's it does hurt my brain to think of it.
Yeah.
Like, make some effort to know the rules of where you are. The guy is dumb as dog shit to do that. The rules are the rules in Japan, and they make it very clear when you arrive. And even if they don't, the team, you could just ask them, hey, what are the rules around this? I want to go do a baggie tonight. How's that going to go down? They're going to say, no, Mr. Ferguson, please don't do that. and you'll say, oh, okay, well, I don't want to lose this good thing I've got going on.
Yeah.
Look,
Just
if I had
wait
been
till
given a
you're somewhere
contract
else.
to go and play rugby in Japan in the back end of my career for $1.5 million, and obviously I'm not a professional footballer, so that's never happened to me. But if I was in that position, I think I would probably not even drink for the first 2.5 months of arriving. Like I would be so paranoid about doing anything to stuff it up.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of money at that time in your life.
Yeah, but how many NRL games you played, champ?
Well, again, I'm not a professional footballer, so I'm not in that position.
Although, for the record, again, you probably could play professional rugby. I think you could go on the street and be very good. Look, I agree with both of you. In fact, if you go to another country, of course, you need to learn what the rules and regulations are. Japan, cocaine bad. Japan, upskirting, okay, for some reason. So you just got to make sure you're au fait with the rules so you don't get into trouble. I wanted to ask this question, just reflecting on Fergo's career. When do we think Fergo was at his best? When was his prime, his apex? You can describe this any way you want, either in terms of the club he was playing for, hair versus post-hair, whatever. For me, it was Canberra. I actually thought he was playing his best footy at Canberra. Back then, my mind remembers him scoring numerous length of the field tries. There were occasions where they just couldn't tackle him. He'd beat 3 or 4 players in one long-range stint. I think as injuries sort of caught up with him, he can sort of curtailed his game a little bit and became a little bit more of a narrow line specialist. But, Canberra for me. What about you guys?
I certainly was going to say Canberra. I think it was quite clear. He showed a lot of promise at the Sharks, but we didn't get to really see what he could do. And then we all sort of wondered, and he got kind of rushed into Origin, I think from memory, after he hadn't done that much at Canberra yet, but he actually did pretty well. And then he really did start to play quite well. And then when he got to you guys, he was still pretty damn good.
Yeah, I think he was, for the Roosters, he was pretty damn good in 2018. But for the rest of the time he was there, he could be as much of a liability as he could be a benefit, to be honest.
Right.
My memories of him at the Roosters, apart from 2018, where he was, I think that was some of his career best form, just in terms of he didn't have any brain snaps either. He was just playing really solid, mistake-free, but also damaging footy. But the years prior to that, I would always be terrified every time the ball went to him that he was going to knock it on, because he had as many drops in him as he did line breaks. So he was very much rocks and diamonds for most of the time he was with us, I thought. So I'd agree that Canberra was probably the best he had, like that period, as you said, when he was carving up.
Xander, do you think that's his ultimate selling point, that he could come back and entertain and regale NRL fans with the most legendary brain snaps of all time? Because I've got to say, in terms of brain snaps, Fergo really led the way. He was someone that was a bit of a trailblazer, I guess you could describe him as. I mean, I remember him playing for the Roosters, and occasionally he just, snapshot field goals to the wrong posts and things like that. You've never seen it before.
And he always had this perplexed look on his face, like, why did I do that?
Yeah, like he didn't quite understand his own cognition. It was a very interesting man. Look, I'm going to wrap up on this, Xander, for you. If you were Fergo's manager, I want you to tell me what are his selling points and what are the drawbacks.
Fergo has the most instinctive white line fever you'll find any footy player, and the drawbacks.
Find the line.
And the drawbacks see above.
He's an idiot. Don't expect him to contribute on the field in any sort of a leadership role. Just put him on a sideline, tell him to tackle that guy, run the ball and run into that guy, and he's actually pretty good.
Keep it really simple.
To me, that's the only way now. He's lost a bit of speed. Towards the end of last year, I thought when he got back in the team, he actually showed a big improvement after having a bit of a break. But he still wasn't wonderful, but he was, better than, there was plenty of other wingers in the comp worse than him, so...
Well, look, we put this out to our Twitter listeners and we asked, should Blake Ferguson get another run in the NRL? And 3/4 of people said, fuck no. So I'm afraid that the fans might not be with him. Look, for what it's worth, in terms of drawbacks, for me, it might be, no night games because he can only play on day release. Welcome back to the Voluntary Tackle. Now, with so much speculation about player transfers and salary cap space dominating the headlines, today on the show we're asking if making an NRL player's salary public would be a positive move by the NRL. Xander, I'm going to start with you. Is it in the best interest of the game to have a player's pay packet out there for all to see?
Yes.
And why is that?
Look, I think most players kind of know what each other are on. And to be honest, all studies around salary transparency tend to be positive. Doesn't matter what industry it is, in terms of encouraging people to get more, to be paid their value. So I actually don't really see a huge downside to it. I know Cam Smith has been a huge critic of it, but I guess he did sign 2 contracts, so that doesn't surprise me.
He does have something to hide. I think even still, I'm feeling there's a few more contracts we don't know about, allegedly. Mario, what about you in terms of, I've noticed the attitude from former players almost always seems to be, this is a shit idea. But from NRL fans, I've noticed that people are sort of polarised on it. I think a lot of people love the idea of knowing, they're intrigued, they're curious, but half of them sort of go, but let's not do it, which is interesting to me. I personally am in favour of it, but where do you land on this one?
The contracts of NBA, NFL, Premier League players, all publicly available, basically. We know what they're on to the dollar pretty much. What they earn from sponsors is usually separate, and I think that's actually the way it should be. We should, as long as the sponsors are not organised by the club, they should be purely privately organised, and any club ever found organising sponsors should just be banned from the competition for a year, and that'll fix the fucking problem in a second, because all the other codes don't seem to have this issue. Why do we have such a outdated, conservative bloody idea for this supposed working class game that, we have to keep our wages private because what? Otherwise people are going to try and steal our bitcoins? What the hell is the issue here? And the absolute balls on that fucking cheating cunt to even talk about salary bloody visibility. My God, go and shoot yourself in the head, you hypocritical piece of shit.
Oh, Xander, I didn't know.
I think you've just stated what I said, just with the tiniest bit more vitriol there.
That's right. And he should never talk about Adam McDougall in such terms. I take exception on Adam's behalf. But I guess I'm also curious as to what do we think the benefits of doing this would be to NRL fans, to the game, to players? Why would we do this?
Why do we need benefits? It's just every other sport can do it. Let's just get rid of the stupid conversation. I mean, especially as Roosters fans, the team that most often get told, you're under, you're cheating, you're underplaying people. It's just a tired argument that just lets idiots talk like idiots. Maybe it's a good thing to give the idiots something to talk about so that we can try and keep them away from actual important conversations. Maybe that's a good thing. So there you go. There's a benefit of keeping them quiet.
Xander, look, for me, I can see it from an immediate benefit in terms of it being just an interesting talking point between fans, for media organisations, who are looking for additional analysis about the game and getting more people to talk about rugby league. It strikes me as tends to be a positive thing. I thought that maybe publishing people's salaries would just be, put an extra dimension onto conversations about transfers, about, the way that a club recruits and in terms of, how we often talk about, wow, that club, I can't believe we recruited him. What a howler of a decision. But maybe it's not a howler if they're only paying him $100K a year. So it might actually inform fans a little bit more as to the decision-making process. That's just my 2 cents. But how do you see that element of it?
Well, yeah, it's precisely what I said before as well. There has been research done into this, and they do find that there've been arguments about this in every industry for decades about you're gonna cause jealousy, etc., and mostly it's people who have a dog in the fight, wanting to protect information on how much they're earning because they probably shouldn't be earning that much. I think that the transparency rule, for all the reasons you've just said, will be an interesting talking point for analysts, but also for teams as well. It will lead to greater accountability among the players. If somebody's being paid 3 times as much as an up-and-comer who's outperforming them, then that is going to have an impact on that player and others around them. It will actually create accountability within teams and also probably reflect better future contract value for those players.
Yeah, Mario, I'm interested in that point. in terms of, would it create jealousies? Xander says it, that's just maybe a muted point, but is there a danger it might actually split teams up if they know what other players are on? And I'll give you an example. What if Craig Wing ever found out that his $550,000 a year contract was actually eclipsed by Todd Burns' $1.2 million a deal?
Bad luck. Get a better manager.
Guys, have they ever raised this? I mean, I know I hear people on social media talking about this. Occasionally, every 6 months, we'll get someone in the media who might talk about it. But has PVL or Abdo ever raised this, in your knowledge, as a real prospect of something being implemented?
Not to my knowledge, to be honest. I mean, I've only heard it come up in the media. I haven't actually seen it proposed as an official NRL idea at this stage.
I mean, because if it's such a no-brainer, and we all seem to be in agreement that it is, what would be the hold-up there, do you think? Is it the fact that it's the players' body?
I suspect it's the players' union.
Yeah, the players' union.
I
thought that
suspect
too.
It's the players' union.
Yep.
And keeping them on side because it's been a pretty tricky couple of years with COVID and getting players to accept pay cuts and a whole lot of other things.
Guys, we also put this one out to the TVT polls. We asked, should fans know what rugby league players are earning? And 57% said yes. So they're not in total agreement. And I love this again from Giannis, one of our fanatics, who said, should fans know rugby league podcasters' favourite sexual positions? One answer was yes, it's the David Barnhill, or no, it's the Anasta. And it was a 50-50 split among 75 votes, so very contentious among the Barnhill sexual positions. So thank you again, Giannis. Look, for what it's worth, guys, I'd prefer to know what parlour game each player prefers to play at home. I want that made public. Is it Operation or is it Guess Who? I want to know, Big Papa. Answer me, Luke Keary. Is it Cluedo or Monopoly? The NRL needs to grow a pair. How good was that game, by the way? Unbelievable. I still play that as an adult. It seems unseemly. I play it alone in the dark, but I fucking love it because no one else will play with me. Look, the NRL needs to grow a pair, in my opinion, and make it public because only then will the game grow and be the game it needs to be. Before that, how shit is the game Operation? Do you guys ever play that as a kid?
A little bit. Not a big fan of it, I must admit.
I mean, do you remember the guy's deranged head? Like, even as a 7-year-old, I remember thinking, why am I trying to save this guy's life? Let him flatline and let's play some Super Nintendo.
We used to think that Ronald McDonald was someone to be admired rather than just some grotty pedo. So, we like some weird things in the late 80s, early 90s.
That's right.
I never thought he was so much a grotty pedo. I thought he was probably more a serial killer. I mean, clowns and yeah.
I don't know, Xander, you should have seen what Ronald McDonald in the late 70s was putting in the Happy Meals. Oof, it was unseemly. All right, we're coming to the time of the show where we look forward into round 3 and we try to find out we try to tax our brains trust, essentially, to find out who will be the winners and make people some money on multis. Let's face it, it's all about brass tacks, about gambling, except for Mario, who's scrupulously moral when it comes to that. Barely has a drink, Mario. He might have a snifter at port at Christmas. That's about it. So, guys, we're going to start with the opening game. And I've got to say, for me, this is already the game of the round. It's Sharks versus Dragons. It's I guess these two teams traditionally play out some pretty good games anyway. It's a quasi-local derby. I know one of them's a merged club and it doesn't quite work out geographically, but it's as close as you get outside of the Roosters and South. So, I'm really looking forward to this game because based on the first 2 rounds, they've both played some pretty entertaining football, actually. And I don't know if necessarily most of the rugby league public would have assumed that would be the case after 2 rounds. I think it'll be the Sharks. But I think it'll be a cracker, and I don't think there'll be much in it. I'll start with you, Mario.
I'm totally torn, and the only reason I'm going Sharks is simply because of my ladder predictions. I want it to be right, so if I have to be 50-50, I'll go with the team that I had finishing above the other, so Sharks.
Sharks. And look, I should open with this, and I was planning to do this. The ins and outs for each team. Teague Wilton and Mulatalo are out for the Sharks, and so is Andrew McCulloch for St. George. The ins for Sharks squad. Braden Trindle, Franklin Pele, Jack Williams, Lachlan Miller, Luke Metcalf, Royce Hunt, and Thomas Hazelton. Now, that's obviously their top 24, so they may not get a run. In fact, you know this to be the case because in number 24 for the Dragons, it's George Burgess. Big chance he may not be playing because I think he'd still be answering some pretty searching questions down at Cogra Police Station. The ins for St. George, Daniel Alvaro, Jackson Ford, Jaden Hunt, Michael Molo and Toto Moga. I'm going to go to you, Xander. Who's going to win this one?
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think it will be very close, but I've been really impressed with the Sharks the first couple of weeks. And I do think, it is a grudge match. It's obviously going to be played at home for St George, but I think Nico Hines has really added a lot since coming there. I was tempted to have him as my kind of standout for the round. I just wanted to be funny in picking a hectic cheese before, but him icing that conversion after doing an awful lot to help them win that game in general was just pretty stellar. So I think he's an X factor that could push it their way just.
Do you know how, I mean, this expression gets trotted around way too often, but eyes up football. I feel like Nico Hines is like the king of that. Like the way he can sort of float across he doesn't seem like he's crabbing. He sort of glides across, searching for that opportunity, and he has a really good instinct for finding either the runner or the open hole, seems to make the right decision most of the time. And I guess when you're you're fitting into a new club, it's quite impressive to be doing that so early. But look, we'll move on to the next game. It's the Tigers versus the Warriors. Are we all just going to say Warriors and move on?
Yep.
Yeah, great. We're not even going to read out the team sheets because the Tigers aren't A grade. I'm very sorry, Tigers fans. In fact, I'm actually angry for you. They should be better than this, and my heart is weeping for you. The Friday game, that is the traditional grudge match, and I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to this, between Souths and the Roosters. I'm going to start with you, Mario. Who's going to win this one?
All right. It's such a tough game, and I still can't bloody decide. I think Souths were flattered, though, by the scoreline in the end, and the fact that, if Latrell kicked the goal, they probably won the game, but they were terrible for 62 minutes or something like that. So I'll go Roosters. They were at least good for 35 minutes against Manly.
Xander, and I will go to you. And again, I've forgotten to read out the ins and outs, but people should know in terms of this game, there virtually are none, both are sort of as per program from last week. So who do you see winning?
Yeah, look, I think Souths are going to be much improved. They always lift massively when they play us. So I suspect them to really take the game to us, but I also expect there to be plenty of feeling from the Roosters, because it will be the first game they play each other after Latrell effectively maimed Joey Manu last year. So I think that the Roosters will be out with a point to prove that as much as anyone, they'll be really up for this game. So I'm tipping the Roosters.
Yeah, I'm going to lean with the Roosters as well, but I do note that the last couple of occasions, the emotion has certainly gotten to the Tricolours, and we have not played our best football. Kind of hoping the pennies dropped, and this time we managed to contain that, because we tend to do a lot of dumb things, and that's saying something, because Latrell Mitchell scalped someone in his game against us. So
I felt the last few games that Souths have appeared more motivated and played with more passion and hatred for us than we do against them. I'm hoping this game marks a turnaround in that trend.
All right, we're going to move on to the next game, and it is Penrith versus the likely wooden spooners, the Newcastle Knights. In terms of ins and outs, there's no Lachlan Fitzgibbon for the Knights, and there's no Brian To'o for the Penrith Panthers. Instead, let's find out who their replacements are. Someone named Taylon May has been named on the wing for the Panthers, and I'm not sure who's replacing Lachlan Fitzgibbon, and I don't care to search, quite frankly. For me, it's going to be Penrith. I think this will be the game that it finally tolls on the Knights. I think at the moment they have been flattered with this win-loss. I think they've come up against two teams that have played deplorably, and it will be interesting because I don't think the Panthers will do that. So for me, it could actually get ugly. That's my prediction. We'll start with you, Mario.
I don't think it's going to get ugly. I think it'll be 24 to 8 sort of scoreline. I think it'll be a contest for about 60 minutes, with Penrith scoring once or twice late to make it a relatively comfortable victory. But we can at least say that it was a contest. I think the Knights are still pretty good, which I did say at the start of the year anyway, and I think that they're showing that to be they're better than we expected. The fact that they did that last week without Ponga, it was a good team effort. I thought Frizzell was really, really good in particular. I just thought his go forward was excellent, and considering they did have some outs, I think I was impressed by the Knights, but not enough for them to get over Penrith.
Xander, Mario could be right there. Knights might be the best performed last place team at the end of the year. I'm not sure. Well, I guess we'll find out come finals time. They won't be there, obviously. They'll be watching from the stands. It should note as well that Nathan Cleary has been named on an extended bench. So there's every chance that he might be coming in either from the bench or playing at the number 7 for Sean O'Sullivan. I want to get your predictions, though, Xander. Who's going to win, Panthers and the Knights?
Yeah, I think the Knights have been very good the first couple of weeks, but again, they played a very out of sorts Roosters and the team that wasn't there last week. So I don't see them getting over the top of a very good Panthers side that's very clinical. I think they'll hold their own. They'll perform well. I think they'll push the Panthers more than people will expect, because I do think that they, in spite of how bad we were, the Knights were really controlled and played very, very tight footy in that first round game, and they were just utterly dominant against the Tigers. So I think they'll be good, but I just don't think they'll have enough firepower to knock over the Panthers.
Yep, fair enough. We move to the Storm Eels game down there at Amy Park.
Storm.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's right. Look, it's an interesting one, isn't it? It's an intriguing battle, this one, because late breaking news, as we mentioned off air, actually, we haven't announced this on air. Harry Grant is out. He has COVID, and that's a big blow to a Storm team that's already struggling to field troops. So they've got a number of people out. In addition to Harry Grant, obviously, they're missing their guys like Brandon Smith, and they've lost their big prop for the year. So they're going to struggle. Whereas for the Eels, the only person that's out is Jake Arthur, which sort of bodes well for them. I've shifted my tip on this one, guys. I'm actually going to go the Eels. I'd start with you this time, Xander. Who's going to win this one?
Yeah, all jokes aside, I tipped the Eels as well, just because last year they had the wood on them, and with all the outs at the moment from the Storm, I do think that Para were also a little embarrassed on the weekend. So I suspect they'll be wanting to come back, and they'll be pretty motivated after I think they'll feel like they really let one get away against the Sharks last week, and they always seem to get up against the Storm.
Yeah, you're right. They have got a good recent track record. Mario, what say you?
Parramatta, the scoreline and result flattered them in round one, and I actually think the same thing happened again in round two, but I think the fact that they weren't able to get it over the line will make them realise that some things weren't going the right way for them, and I think they'll have enough to get over the Storm team just based on that they do just get up against the Storm. I don't know if it's, memories in the club of 2009 has them all, gets them fired up or whatever it is, but they seem to lift, and I think they will lift again just enough.
I tell you what, it's an ominous sign. 3 people betting against the Storm. That's a pretty rare thing to happen. We'll see.
Storm 13 plus.
Melbourne are going to thrash them. Yeah, I think we're just ensured that
you've
it's going to
heard it here,
happen.
folks. Bet against TVT, and you will be a wealthy person. The next game, Raiders versus the Titans. Geez, the Raiders were awful last round. Titans. Look, they have struggled in high-scoring games, in sort of seesaw-y type games. Clear issues with their defence, but they can score some points. But based on the Raiders' performance last round, I mean, the fact that their entire performance seems to hinge on Jack Whiten being happy, that's a dangerous variable for me, because I don't know when he's going to turn up and be happy. He was in the first round, and they managed to knock over the Sharks, but he was a virtual ghost in that second game against the Cowboys. For me, it's the Titans.
Yeah, look, I'm denied about this one. This was one of the harder ones this week for me to pick, but I am tempted to give the Raiders another shot. I thought they were a little embarrassed, and when Jack Whiten does play well, he can really break a game open. And the Titans, they're very similar teams. They seem to really be almost mercurial kind of mood-based sides where it requires a few players to really hit their stride and have that freedom to move. So I think Canberra being at home could just tip it in their favour. So I'm going to go with the Raiders.
Yeah, look, and something I should have mentioned as well, Mario, before we get your thoughts, the outs for Canberra, James Schiller And the ins include Nick Kotrick, Jordan Rapana, Brad Schneider, and Sam Williams, and Ryan Sutton. And the ins in the squad for the Titans, Eason Masters, Jermaine Asako, who's just made a late switch, and Paul Turner. What say you in terms of this game?
Well, you forgot Josh Hodgson being out for the Raiders as well.
That's right. It's an ACL diagnosed, right?
Yeah, he's out for the season, so his Raiders' career is over after 130-odd games.
I actually think that might help them, though. He hasn't been that good the last couple of years.
Look, yeah, he definitely hasn't, but bringing back Schneider, who's played, 4 games or something, and as much as I'm a Sam Williams fan, I'm more of a Jermaine Asako fan, and that's going to lead me to Titans getting the wood over them.
Yep, fair enough. Look, we're going to move on to the first Sunday match, and it's an all-Queensland affair, Broncos versus the Cowboys. I've loved the way the Broncos have played the first 2 rounds. On performance, they've played really well. They're still finding their stride and their combinations as well. Adam Reynolds only makes them stronger. So for me, it's the Broncos. I think the Cowboys have been a mixed bag at best.
Yeah, look, we don't know what the Cowboys really faced last week. So in terms of, as we said, were they good or were their opposition bad? Brisbane were decent last week. They were quite good in round 1. And so I think I have to go Brisbane, but not with a huge amount of confidence. But I think they'll get the job done.
What about you, Xander?
Yeah, no, I agree. I've actually been quite impressed with the Broncos in the first couple of weeks. They've been, a little bit patchy in parts, but I think Adam Reynolds has just adds so much to that side. And just the fact that they're almost certainly going to be going up in sixes more than 4s, in a close game will effectively mean that they're more likely to win it.
Yeah.
And I just think that the Cowboys haven't shown enough this year, to convince me they can really compete with more polished sides. So I'm going to go with the Broncos in this one. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing Adam Reynolds play in that Broncos jersey again. It's still very jarring, I have to say, but I've been enjoying it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how obviously Jason Taumalolo goes after that return to form from last week. And I have to say, Billy Walters played very well from the bench. He's had 2 really good games to open up the season. It'd be interesting to see if he can maintain that because, his form was sort of indifferent at the Tigers before arriving there, but he seems to be playing better for his old man. We're going to come to the last game. It's your game, Mario. It's the Mighty Eagles versus the Dogs. They're playing over at Brookie. In terms of ins, let's have a look here. The Manly side have, according to this, George Tafua, your favourite, Morgan Boyle, I'm going to get some of these names wrong, Alec Tuatavake, Christian Tuapalotu, and James Romanos. And the ins for the Dogs include Brandon Wakeham, Joe Stimson, Joshua Cook, Kyle Flanagan comes into the extended bench, and so does Reece Hoffman. We're going to start with you, Mario, seeing it's your team. How do you see it going?
Well, I'm very hopeful that the first 2 you mentioned are just extended bench and not actually making the team, or I might cry because Morgan Boyle is absolute garbage and Tafua hasn't been good since the middle of 2014.
Or since the Middle Ages. Yeah, it's been a while. So
I'm taking my son to his first ever footy game.
Oh, nice work.
On Sunday.
That'll be a good moment.
Driving down to Sydney. I've been saving him, wanting to make sure Brookvale was his first game because he's a big Manly fan. He got to meet Beaver yesterday, which is a big highlight. So he's very keen to go to the game. He might watch about 10 minutes of it, and the rest just slide on cardboard boxes down the back of the hill, which is a tradition at Brookvale Oval, and that's totally fine. But I can't fathom that his first game is possibly going to be a loss to the Bulldogs. So Manly 13+.
I love it. Look, we are running out of time on our record, Xander, so we might have to be a little bit brief. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, Manly. Dogs have been all right, but I as bad as Manly have been in parts, I think they've shown enough promise to be too good for the Dogs for me.
Well, it's an interesting one. I think this is another intriguing match. The parochial Manly crowd, which will only be more parochial with Mario there, obviously, yelling obscenities from the hill. So that'll be tough on a Sunday night. But I'm going to go on performance here. I'm going to lean the Dogs in a tight one, just given from what we've seen the Manly side dish up so far and the fact that really the Dogs should be 2 from 2 based on their their first two games, in my opinion. So I'm going to go with them by 2 points. Well, those were our predictions for the coming rounds. Look, on a sad note, before we go, it's come to the voluntary tackle's attention that former Roosters bench warmer Ryan Hall has made a tragic announcement this week. The emotional 34-year-old fronted the media to let them know that after hundreds of games and countless bomb tries, he'll be playing on in spite of all of the evidence. To all of the Hull fans, my thoughts are with you. Remember, there is support out there. Beyond Blue might not take your call, but 1-800-349-876 will. That's 1-800-BEYOND Hall. Hang in there. He'll be gone soon. That's all from us, tacklers. Thanks for joining us for another week. And again, if you could rate and comment on the pod wherever you're listening to this, that would be greatly appreciated. I'll actually wait for you to do it this time. Now that I think about it. Oh, and you're not doing it yet. I'll do this all day, mate. I don't care. Just got to take your phone out of your pocket and just scribble a few words or rate, whatever. Come on. There you go. Thank you. Don't Google Pornhub. Go to Apple Podcast. Whoa. You watch midget porn. You know what? You can keep your review. It's fine. So until next time, just do what Madge Maguire would do at dinner time with the family and aggressively demand knife and fork efficiency from the table before getting it all wrong yourself and accidentally piercing your thumb with a blunt spork. Catch you next time, tacklers.